There are moments in a relationship when something feels off, but no clear words explain it. A man feels smaller in his own house, weaker in his own skin, not because of direct insults but because of subtle actions. A smile that cuts deeper than anger, a silence that weighs heavier than shouting, or a casual comparison that makes him question his worth. These behaviors are not always conscious. Women may not even realize how much power they carry when they use them. But the impact on men is real, and often devastating. Why would a woman who says she loves a man use behaviors that quietly weaken him? Sometimes it is instinct. Sometimes it is fear. Sometimes it is a test born from ancient survival psychology. Behind the soft words and the gentle gestures lies a darker current, the need to know if the man is strong enough to hold his ground. The most dangerous part is not the behavior itself, but the fact that it hides in plain sight. Men rarely recognize it until the damage is already done. But once you see it, you cannot unsee it. And once you understand it, you cannot be broken by it. A man can face direct confrontation with ease. Shouting, arguments, and insults are open battles, and men are often prepared for them. But what most men are not prepared for are the quiet cuts that come from words and gestures that seem harmless on the surface but slowly carve away at their strength. This is where the most hidden behaviors begin. Consider the offhand remark, "Why cannot you be more like him?" It is said with a smile, perhaps even in a playful tone, but its shadow lingers. Comparison is one of the oldest ways to weaken someone. It does not attack directly, it places a mirror in front of a man, reflecting not who he is, but who he is not. Over time, these small remarks create cracks in his confidence. Carl Jung spoke of archetypes, the deep patterns of human identity. For a man, strength and competence form a central part of his archetype. When those are questioned, even in subtle ways, it shakes the foundation of who he believes he is. A woman may not intend to destroy his confidence when she points out his flaws in comparison to another, but the impact runs deeper than she realizes. Gestures can wound just as much as words. A dismissive glance when he speaks, rolling eyes during a disagreement, or laughter at his mistakes. These gestures communicate without language, but their meaning is sharp. A man who faces this repeatedly begins to doubt himself even in silence. He wonders if his words matter, if his presence is valued, if his role is respected. The dark psychology behind this behavior is not always conscious malice. Sometimes it is instinctive testing. A woman may diminish her man subtly to see if he will stand firm or collapse under pressure. She may not even know she is doing it. Other times, it is a projection of her own insecurity. By making him feel smaller, she unconsciously tries to feel bigger. But in both cases, the result is the same: the man feels reduced. Nietzsche once said, "Whoever fights monsters should see to it that in the process he does not become a monster." In relationships, the same holds true. When one partner uses subtle diminishing, they risk turning love into a battlefield of quiet wounds. The man who accepts it blindly begins to lose himself. The man who sees it clearly can choose to respond differently, not with anger, but with awareness. The hidden danger is that these behaviors rarely appear dramatic enough to be noticed. They slip beneath the radar. They are dismissed as jokes, as nothing serious. But repetition is what gives them power. A single drop of water does not harm a stone, but constant dripping can carve through it. In the same way, subtle diminishing can hollow out a man's confidence until he no longer recognizes himself. There is a silence that hurts more than words. Not the silence of peace, but the silence of absence. One of the hidden behaviors that weakens men most deeply is not what a woman says, but what she stops giving. Affection, warmth, and small gestures of closeness are not luxuries in a relationship, they are the invisible threads that bind two people together. When those threads are withdrawn, the fabric begins to tear. At first, it can appear subtle. A man reaches for her hand, and she does not move away, but she does not return the touch either. He comes home expecting a smile, but instead receives indifference. These moments seem small, yet they are powerful. Human beings are wired to respond to connection. When it is removed, the brain reads it as danger, as rejection. For a man, this silence can feel like standing in a cold room that once was warm. Sigmund Freud once said that human behavior is driven by two main forces, the need for love and the avoidance of pain. When affection is withheld, it strikes both at once. The man longs for closeness and feels pain at its absence. He questions himself, what did I do wrong? Am I no longer enough? Has she found someone better? This self-doubt eats at him more than any insult could. The withdrawal of affection often works as an invisible weapon because it does not look like aggression. No words are spoken, no fights are started. Yet the effect is heavier than any argument. A man may forgive harsh words, but it is harder to forgive emptiness, because emptiness gives him nothing to hold on to. Dark psychology teaches that silence can be more manipulative than noise. When affection is withheld intentionally, it becomes a form of control. It is as if saying, you will only feel warmth when you behave as I want you to. Some women may not plan this consciously, but it still trains the man's mind like a hidden conditioning. He begins to fear losing love if he does not comply. Slowly, he sacrifices parts of himself to win back the warmth. This is where the most dangerous shift happens. The man who was once strong becomes needy. The one who was once independent begins to seek constant approval. He bends, he compromises, he abandons his own boundaries just to feel wanted again. This transformation does not happen overnight, it is a slow erosion of his identity. Jung spoke of the shadow, the hidden parts of ourselves we do not want to face. When a man is starved of affection, his shadow grows restless. It feeds on rejection, anger, and fear. If he is not aware of it, this shadow can turn him bitter, aggressive, or broken. Affection, or the absence of it, is never neutral. It either builds or it breaks. For a man, the absence of a touch, a smile, or a kind word can cut deeper than any visible wound. And the longer it continues, the more it reshapes who he is. There is a unique kind of poison that does not kill the body, but slowly weakens the spirit. It is the constant questioning of a man's feelings, the quiet dismissal of his emotions, the invisible suggestion that his inner world is either wrong, excessive, or unworthy of attention. This is one of the most hidden behaviors that can silently break him. A man is often told from a young age to be strong and not cry. Society already trains him to bury his emotions deep inside, to wear strength as a mask even when he is hurting. But when the woman he loves, the one person he trusts enough to lower his guard, tells him that his feelings are too much, or not valid, or a sign of weakness, the wound cuts much deeper. It is not just dismissal. It feels like betrayal. The methods are rarely loud. They might appear as small phrases, like, "You are overreacting." "Why are you being so sensitive?" "You are making this bigger than it is." To someone outside, these might sound harmless. But to the man hearing them, they are messages that his inner world is not respected. Over time, he learns to silence himself, not because his feelings have disappeared, but because he no longer believes they deserve to be heard. Nietzsche once said that the worst kind of loneliness is not being alone, but being misunderstood. When a man feels that his emotions are dismissed in the very relationship that should protect them, he is trapped in a prison with open doors. He could leave, but love keeps him inside. And so he stays, enduring the quiet erosion of his soul. The psychological impact of this behavior is heavier than many realize. Studies show that emotional invalidation increases stress hormones in the body, raises anxiety, and even disrupts sleep. For men, who already hesitate to share feelings, repeated invalidation creates a cycle of silence. They stop speaking, they withdraw, and slowly they start to believe that their emotions are a burden. This belief can become deadly, because suppressed emotions often transform into anger, depression, or destructive behavior. Sometimes, emotional undermining is not intentional cruelty. A woman might truly believe she is helping when she tells him not to take things so seriously. She may not realize that what he needed in that moment was not a solution, but acknowledgement. Yet intention does not erase impact. A gentle knife still cuts. Carl Jung explained that the psyche needs balance between the masculine and the feminine energies. When a man's emotional side is crushed repeatedly, he becomes lopsided, locked only in hardness. He loses access to his softer self, the part that makes him human, the part that loves freely. In this way, emotional undermining not only damages the man but also the relationship itself, because love cannot survive where emotions are not safe. When words strip a man of his voice, he does not always scream. More often, he grows silent. And sometimes, that silence is the loudest sign of his breaking. There are wounds that come not from rejection, but from the slow retreat of warmth. When closeness is replaced with calculated distance, the man is left in a state of confusion. This behavior is not as loud as anger and not as sharp as criticism, but it can be just as destructive. It is the quiet withdrawal of affection, the sudden coldness in tone, the invisible wall built brick by brick through silence. A man in love depends on the consistency of presence. He may not ask for flowers or constant words of affirmation, but he reads warmth in the small touches, the shared laughter, the gentle rhythm of daily care. When those vanish without explanation, his mind does not stay calm. It begins to search, to question, to replay every moment, wondering what he has done wrong. This silent punishment is a powerful form of control because it leaves him desperate for answers, desperate for approval, desperate to repair what he cannot even define. Psychologists call this intermittent reinforcement, a tactic often used unconsciously. One day she is close, soft, and loving. The next day she is cold, withdrawn, untouchable. This pattern triggers the same psychological response found in gambling. Uncertainty creates obsession. Just as a gambler keeps pulling the lever, hoping for the next reward, the man keeps chasing her warmth, hoping today will be the day she returns to him fully. Freud once wrote that the human mind struggles most with uncertainty. A direct rejection is painful, but at least it is clear. With subtle distance, the man remains suspended in a gray space where nothing is confirmed, nothing is denied. It is a slow burn that eats away at his confidence. In real relationships, this can appear as unanswered messages, delayed replies, sudden lack of intimacy, or the deliberate withholding of kindness after a disagreement. It is not always malicious. Sometimes a woman uses distance to express hurt she cannot verbalize. But when it becomes a repeated pattern, it transforms into control, because the man learns to shape his behavior in fear of losing her presence again. The tragedy is that many men misinterpret this withdrawal as a challenge to fight harder. They bring more gifts, more effort, more energy, believing they must earn back the closeness. In doing so, they unknowingly reward the very behavior that undermines them. They enter a cycle where love is no longer free, but conditional, granted only when they perform well enough. This type of control is subtle but effective. It does not shout. It whispers through absence. An absence can echo louder than presence when it comes from someone we deeply love. Over time, the man begins to live not for his own truth, but for the unpredictable rhythm of her distance and return. He loses his own center, orbiting only around her moods. That loss of self is the true cost of this hidden behavior. Every hidden behavior that undermines a man leaves behind one final scar, the loss of his own reflection. He begins to forget who he was before the doubts, before the silence, before the quiet manipulations that rewrote the rhythm of his heart. But there is a way back, and it does not begin with confrontation. It begins with awareness. When a man learns to see the patterns clearly, he reclaims the power that was slowly taken from him. Recognizing criticism not as truth, but as a tool. Recognizing invalidation not as weakness within him, but as dismissal outside him. Recognizing distance not as a signal of his unworthiness, but as a method of control. The moment he names the behavior, the invisible chains begin to loosen. Carl Jung believed that what we fail to make conscious will return to us as fate. If a man ignores these behaviors, he will repeat the same wounds in every relationship, believing them to be destiny. But when he brings light to them, he changes the story. He is no longer a silent participant in his own erosion. He becomes the author of his boundaries. Reclaiming strength does not mean responding with anger or cruelty. It means refusing to let his worth be measured by constant criticism. It means allowing his emotions to exist without apology, even if they are dismissed. It means not chasing warmth when it is deliberately withheld, but standing in his own light until the other chooses to return honestly. Nietzsche wrote that he who has a why can bear almost any how. A man who knows his value, who carries a deep purpose, will not crumble under undermining behaviors. He may feel the sting, but he will not lose himself. His identity will no longer depend on unpredictable approval, but on an inner compass that cannot be shaken by silence, distance, or dismissal. It is important to understand that not every woman who undermines a man does so with malice. Sometimes she acts from her own wounds, her own insecurities, her own unconscious need for control. Understanding this does not excuse the behavior, but it prevents the man from sinking into hatred. Healing requires clarity, not bitterness. In the end, the hidden behaviors that undermine men are powerful only when they remain unseen. The moment a man brings them into the open, their strength fades. Love cannot survive in the shadows of control, but it can grow in the light of truth. If both choose awareness, the relationship can transform. If only one does, then the one who awakens must decide whether to stay or walk away. What matters most is that no man allows the erosion of his soul in silence. His emotions are not weakness. His voice is not excessive. His worth is not negotiable. He has the right to stand whole, unbroken, and unashamed, even in a world that often seeks to chip away at his edges.